such a good question, and it's a common question. I think I work with a lot of women who are like, I feel like I should know this because everyone talks about a birth plan, but like, what's a birth plan? And you shouldn't know this because you've never done this before, so it's okay. There is, of course, a whole chapter on birth plans in the Motherly Guide to Becoming Mama, and we touch on like all the different aspects that you can include. Also at Motherly, we have a free printable birth plan worksheet, so we'd love to invite you to come and download that. Things to consider. First of all, in terms of a birth plan, I prefer, that's the term we use, but I like to think of it as birth preferences, because birth is a force of nature and we don't always know how it's going to go. We know a lot about how it's going to go, but things can happen and the story can sort of change as it unfolds. So I like to think about it in terms of birth preferences. You're making choices with the information that you have, and that as your story unfolds, you feel informed and like you were part of the decision. What I really don't want to have happen is have someone look back at their birth and feel like, oh, it didn't go according to plan. That means I failed. Because a human has just come out of your body. Like, there is nothing about that is failing in any way. So again, creating a birth plan, but also allowing yourself the flexibility to go with your story and make changes as you need to. Things to consider are things we've talked about, where to give birth and who will be there at your birth. Thinking about what coping skills work for you, which ones you really like, which ones you're not so into. Thinking about how you want the baby to be cared for after the baby is born. Thinking about pain medication. Thinking about all the different interventions, which ones are you maybe okay with, which ones do you really not want to have, if at all avoidable. Again, just sort of looking at all of the sort of possible ways that your story could go, forming an opinion, writing that opinion down, or having a conversation with your provider so that as your story unfolds, you can feel as good about it and as informed as possible. What happens if I do need to have a cesarean section? Do I want to have a gentle C-section? Is that something that's important to me? Do I want to have a clear drape or a blue drape? Do I want my partner to come into the room if at all possible? Thinking about, just sort of like, if this, then what? Also, the birth plan helps you to communicate with your team. So one of the areas that this is really helpful is with the epidural decision. So say you, for example, have decided that you really don't want to have an epidural. You really want to have an unmedicated birth. But your team doesn't know that. And so every half an hour, they're coming into the room saying, would you want an epidural? Would you want an epidural? You can get an epidural now. Like, that's probably going to drive you bonkers, right? So if you say in your birth plan, prefer unmedicated birth, please do not offer an epidural. If I need one, I will ask for one. It allows you to communicate that desire with the team so that they can communicate appropriately with you. Does that mean that if you change your mind and you want an epidural that you can't get one? Absolutely not. You can always change your mind. It's just going to help the team make sure that you feel as supported as possible as you go through the journey. So there are a number of things, one of which is, do you want to breastfeed the baby? Or would you like to bottle feed or pump or some combination thereof? Do you want to do immediate skin to skin with the baby when the baby is born? Or do you think you're going to need a minute? If you are having a boy, do you want him to be circumcised or not? So thinking about all of these things, I think ahead of time can be helpful, because in the moment, you're just meeting your baby. It's like the most, I'm a writer and I still have not actually found the words. And I wrote a book on it and I couldn't find the words to describe this moment of meeting your baby. And so you're like holding this like squishy, wet, delicious baby. And someone's like, do you want to circumcise him? And you're going to be like, what? So having the answers to those questions thought about ahead of time so that you can just be in that moment and not have to sort of leave that newborn delicious zone can be really helpful.
And then how, I guess, do you help women deal with a birth that went not according to plan, that just did not live up to expectations? Because I know I struggled with that. My birth, it was the C-section. I wanted a natural birth, had to be induced. Then I got the epidural because I was so uncomfortable. Then I had to have a C-section. The meds didn't work, so I had to be put under general anesthesia. So
Oh,
like literally
gosh.
everything that went wrong, like could go wrong, went wrong.
I'm sorry.
Which I'm fine now, but I couldn't even talk about my birth.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It is. So what is the advice you give to women in that position of just like, I'm happy to have my baby, but I'm just so upset about how my birth went?
I love that you're asking this question. One of the things that I talk about in the book is how to deal with birth trauma, because it's very real. And birth trauma is decided by like the person who experienced it. So if you felt traumatized by your birth in whatever way, that is legit. And it's okay to be upset. We have, and it comes from a good place. I do believe that. But people will say so often, well, but you're healthy, the baby's healthy. The most important thing. Yes, it is the most important thing. I agree. You agree. Everybody who has had a traumatic birth, like, of course, but that doesn't mean that my really difficult, possibly traumatic experience is not important. So I would say, first and foremost, it is okay to have bad feelings. It is okay to be upset. It is okay to cry when you think about your birth. It is okay to feel angry. Like all of those are difficult but welcomed emotions. Motherhood is never one thing, right? Like you love your kid and you can't wait to put them to bed because you're so tired. Like it's so fun and it's so boring. Like it's so natural and it's so hard. Like it's all things. And birth is the same way too. So you can be really grateful to have a healthy baby and really angry that your birth went the way that it went. Those can coexist. So one, don't feel guilty if you don't like love thinking about your experience. Two, understand that that coping skills and sort of processing those emotions can be difficult but really powerful. There are therapists who specialize in working through those sort of traumatic birth experiences. And it can be really helpful because it can be really empowering. It can help to sort of reframe how you think about it a little bit. And for somebody who is thinking about another pregnancy at some point, it can be helpful in making sure that that pregnancy is as joyful as possible. Someone who had maybe a scary experience doesn't want to have to be scared the whole next pregnancy. So sort of talking through and processing those emotions can be really helpful. Also having conversations with your provider. A lot of times like things happen quickly and we're like using medical lingo and like you're giving birth. So like you're super busy and you're not fully, aware of the conversations that are going on in the room and stuff. So having a debriefing, just saying like, I'm still unclear as to why such and such happened, or when you said this, what did that mean? Or like having those conversations is very much allowed and can sometimes give you more answers because sometimes the like unknowing can feel unsettling. Remember that your provider like is part of your team. You essentially you paid them to help you deliver your baby. So if you have questions, if you want to talk to them, you absolutely can. Don't feel that they're like off limits to you.